Hello, YouTube. I am back today to talk about the upcoming Mars and Saturn conjunction that we have really, it's been brewing now for the past probably couple of days with this new moon um, setting in Aries, which culminated yesterday. Well, when I'm filming this, I'm not sure when you'll be watching this, but depending on your time zone, the new moon reached its culmination in Aries on the 17th, I want to say. Today's the 18th. So, yeah, the 17th of April. And then, of course, I said I would come back kind of soon because, as well as the new moon reaching its culmination, at the same time, a new Mars and Saturn conjunction was brewing and starting to reach its full conjunction, which will be complete, I want to say, sometime on the 19th. I'm just not really sure based on time zones, but it's been in that engagement of the conjunction now for a couple of days. I would say maybe when it got within that 4-5 degree range, you probably have been sort of feeling a little bit of this reset and building over that time period. So today I am on here today to talk a little bit about that and how I think it is going to show up in, not necessarily for all signs, but just give you sort of like a framework to look at. I will focus um, specifically on um, the Pisces ascendant part of life and part of the chart because, well, I'm a Pisces ascendant and yeah, so I can sort of talk more about how it's taking shape or has taken shape for me over the past 2 years. I want to say the one that we are finishing up tomorrow on the 19th, depending on when you're watching this video, um, has been oh boy, my camera is actually able to show people outside. I decided to film sort of the the front part of my house today, or just in the community part, instead of like turn the camera away, so you might see passengers walk by. Anyhow, it's been a kind of rainy day, so I figure, why not try to let some daylight in. But back to the topic. So yeah, so I will focus more on the Pisces part of the chart, the Pisces rising or Pisces ascendant part of the chart, when talking about how this past Mars and Saturn conjunction played out in my own life, and sort of like, if you are a Pisces ascendant, maybe some things that you felt from this past Mars and Saturn conjunction and just Mars and Saturn period of time, and how it has just worked in your life, engaging certain parts of your chart throughout this past 2 years. The last Mars and Saturn start or beginning or seeding point, I like to say, we had was back in, I believe, April 10th, 2024, and it will wrap up on April 19th of 2026, marking its 2-year cycle. So hopefully you enjoy this video. Get you some tea or coffee or wine, depending on what you enjoy sipping on, to listen to some of the things I've put together. And without further ado, so I have a couple of years back, I'm just gonna get a little bit more comfortable here myself. I have a very comfy chair that I enjoy just making these videos in. But a couple years back, I got a book by the author Ren Butler. If you're in the astrological world, then you definitely probably have his book or have heard other astrologers mention him. I'm going to show you the book in case you want to get a copy of it. It is called The Archetypal Universe. And it kind of gives you sort of an overview of what happens when certain energies come together. Like in this case, we have Mars and Saturn coming together. And this is not something new. I mean, this is since the beginning of time, since the beginning of the universe, and astronomers and astrologers were able to track these sort of things that are happening around us. We were able to sort of see, what was going on, or which planets were interacting with what. And so the book is The Archetypal Universe. I'm going to hold it up in my tiny camera here. Hopefully you can see it. It's by Ren Butler. If you are interested, I'm just going to read you some of the a couple of the inserts he wrote on just what it means when planets like Mars and Saturn comes together, okay? So focused and disciplined action, deliberate and determined outputs of energy, quality of hard work and persistence, the capacity to complete projects, active forbearance, oppressive work regimens, inhibited or frustrated energies, a tendency to feel like a victim while acting as a perpetrator, ongoing bitterness and hate, harsh boundary collisions. He also wrote, and I literally thought about this yesterday when I read this, but he wrote, put one's nose to the grindstone, an ability to confront challenging head-on, steady perseverance despite problems, instincts to proceed slowly and carefully, look twice before you leap, the development of practical work skills, an expectation of concrete results from one's efforts, a capacity to complete tasks, the impulse to nail down projects, a sense of slow beginnings but sustained endings, the active and deliberate ending of something, an awareness of the karmic effects of all aggressive actions. I think that's all I highlighted from my time reading it. Oh, and then I don't know why I put this on here, but I guess I kind of do know, Mars is a planet of action. It's a planet of aggression. In astrology, it shows basically how we get down, from every aspect, even sexually. You can look at your Mars sign and it kind of shows you a little bit about your, instinctual sexual nature. A lot of people, I know when I first started learning about astrology and I found that out and, did some research on it just for my own sake, I was pleasantly surprised. So I'm going to read to you what he wrote. Mars Saturn sexual themes tend to focus on the negative consequences of passion and crossing of boundaries, such as unwelcome hugs, cruel partners, or systematic screwing. In positive ways, Saturn can sustain and fortify the rugged physical energies of Mars, such as people training intently for a marathon or barreling around a rocky and winding mountain course. The Mars Saturn fill helps journeyers to get serious and face their most challenging inner material, with just all types of stuff, like if you look at it from a psychological perspective, I think is what he's saying, memories of harsh punishment, abuse from their childhood, or claustrophobia and suffocation. in the birth canal. This is a very interesting read. So if you want a really good book just on, what happens when these archetypal planets come together and the energies that come from them, oftentimes in our world, we don't always know that, these are some of the things that are happening around us, or sometimes we just, we can see the energies happening, but we don't realize sometimes how much, I think, the planets and just the energies that take up space with us have to do with a lot of these. I find it highly fascinating, if you can't tell already. Um, but one thing I wanted to just mention was when planets come together at a new seeding point, it's usually a big deal, okay? You can usually track these times in your own natal charts, and it shows you karma and fruits sown during that time. Um, Mars and Saturn coming together for a new cycle together, which we already spoke about, it usually happens every 2 years. This cycle from the last one is wrapping up April 19th, 2026. So we are finishing up a Mars Saturn conjunction that started a seeding point back in April of 2024. If you can cast your mind and take yourself back to that time frame. Saturn being the slower moving planet, of course, and retrograding several times throughout that time, it's likely to find, or you will find that, you will have a couple of these showdowns in your own natal chart with Saturn and Mars kind of meeting up again and having a discussion about the original intended purpose, which I will share later in the video. So if you stick around that long, you'll hear or can see sort of what I am going to display here on the wheel behind us, just kind of talk through some of the themes of how I watched or saw some of these things unfold in my own life. I don't know what I did with my other notes. I think I see them right now. Okay. So Mars and Saturn are the malefic planets in astrology, meaning that these planets can sometimes pose harm or evil influences on impact. And so a lot of times, depending on how Mars and Saturn are squaring off in your own natal chart, or just, how it affects you, affect you, personally, or even how it affects the collective, is very telling. I have had moments where I had something happen that was unpleasant or harmful to me, and I looked back over my natal chart and I realized that I was going through a really tough Mars period of time in my life. And I was having a transit where Mars was touching down with maybe another personal planet in my chart, and it was causing a lot of issue and problems for me, and sometimes led to harm and great loss. Mars, of course, is the lesser of the malefics, and Saturn is the greater. In my mind, I think it's because Mars goes a little bit faster than Saturn. It takes Saturn, I think 27 to 30 years to complete the full zodiac, where Mars, even with its retrograding periods, tend to be a bit faster than Saturn. So Mars will conjunct Saturn 419, which if you are in the USA, that would be that would be tomorrow, depending on where you are. You could be somewhere else in the world, which means that you probably have already experienced this culmination, or it is culminating right now, and a new Mars and Saturn cycle has begun in your part of the world. Here where I am in the USA, I live in Texas, and so this conjunction will reach its full or full aspect, or make a full aspect where it is same degree and everything with each other at around 6 p.m. around that time Central. Mars will be in Aries at 7 degrees, which I have here on the board, you'll see, and Saturn will be in Aries at 7 degrees. Which I thought was kind of cool, and why I have the sun up there. If you watched my earlier video this week, you notice I used the pom-pom for the sun. I just thought, this pom-pom is, well, one, it's what I could get my hands on. And when you're a crafter, you're like, oh, that kind of, I mean, I would want the sun to be a lot bigger, but, it stands out a little bit more, I think, than the planets. But what I found to be very interesting is that the sun will be at a critical degree in Aries. That is the 29th degree in Aries, and that is considered the critical degree point. In astrology, it's also called the anaretic degree, which means, some astrologers, I think, have looked at it as a crisis point, or just, definitely a wrapping up, or it's just a major point in a cycle, because it is the end, it is the finale, right? Venus will be, another aspect will be, Venus and Uranus will be within that 5 degree engagement of each other, making 5 degree orb of engagement of each other, which means they will be making an aspect depending on how you do your orbs and degrees. And Venus and Uranus are both in Taurus. Uranus is also in the critical degree of Venus, or of Taurus. Is that right? Yeah, of Taurus. And so the moon will be in Gemini, squaring the nodes, which are still in Pisces and Virgo. So I just thought this was a very interesting setup for this new cycle starting. So, if you're like me and you track and you look back and you're like, where was I, or where were things, and what was going on, or what was showing up in my life? Because these are new seeding points, in particular for Mars and Saturn. It marks a new seeding point, I think, of sort of what I read from Ren's book here a little while ago, of, action, and just, really that deliberate action, and wanting to see results from something that you are physically applying. And in Aries, with Mars being domicile there, I think we will actually and can feel a sense of, like, I have to take action. I have to make moves or make steps in this area of my life to at least just get the ball rolling, if anything, at least to kick things off. And I know that Saturn doesn't do so great in Aries, and the sun is exalted in Aries, and it's at the 29 degree mark. So I don't know, like, I think, for me, this is a very, very important time in my life. I think, maybe you would have to look at your own charts and try to track, where is this Aries point starting for you? Or, I like to always think of, like, friends and family members I have. Like, you have Aries in your life, Aries friends or family members, or what have you. It could be a time of, you can see a lot of deliberate action, steps being taken. If you are a sun sign Aries, or, maybe even Libra, since that's on that same axis. So now what I would like to talk about, let's see. So I want to switch over into now the Pisces ascendant part of this. We're at about 20 minutes in, and so I'm finished with, what I wanted to share about for just as a collective Mars and Saturn point in your chart. And now I want to share about what has it been like, okay, as a Pisces ascendant, finishing up this last Mars and Saturn time that we just went through. Because remember, we're starting a new cycle because we just finished an old cycle that started back in 2024. And so now I am going to shift into that portion. So you are welcome to stay around, even if you aren't a Pisces ascendant, and learn about that as well. And I'm going to put up some more things I'm going to put up some more things here on the wheel, the zodiacal wheel, and kind of just show a little bit about what I think for Pisces ascendant, being a Pisces ascendant, and sort of talking a little bit about what I saw happening throughout this last Mars and Saturn conjunction in 2024. So without further ado, hello Pisces ascendant. If you are a Pisces ascendant, welcome. This is our space. Being a Pisces ascendant for myself, I'm coming more into, my energy and welcoming other Pisces ascendants, because I think I don't think, I definitely would love to draw, I think, a community of people who share the same energy as me. And I don't know, I think I'm in that part of my life now where I tend to wonder, like, how is this playing out in others' worlds, or from their viewpoints? Or maybe they don't know. Maybe you're new to astrology and you want to see how this is playing out for you. And if that's the case, please leave me a comment, or I have an email in my description box. So please leave me an email or send me an email. I would love to talk about this or chat about this with you more. I really am getting in that. For, as you can see, this Mars and Saturn for me, it's really making me feel the need to put myself out there more. Pisces ascendants, this is happening as I'm speaking in our second house. I'll put that up at the end because I want to first just go back in time and kind of talk about what happened over this last cycle. So the last cycle, it happened in April 10th, and I have exact days. So I look down a lot because I'm just trying to make sure I say the exact times and days and degree points. Just in case you have, I think it's important to know the degree points, because if you have this degree point at a very personal planet in your natal chart, then you are really feeling this energy, right? Like, if it's, say, for instance, if this degree, this Mars and Saturn conjunction was like at the same degree point as your sun sign or your moon sign or any of your other personal planets, then you really felt this area of your life being activated over the past 2 years pretty strongly. So that's why I love to put out there the exact degree points. So it happened April 10th, 2024, which I've already mentioned, and Mars and Saturn came together for a new seeding point at that time at 14 degrees of Pisces. And if you are a Pisces ascendant, that was, as you can see in our first house here, because Pisces is, our first house. Let's see, a few days before that, which I thought was kind of cool. I did a little bit of research on it. A few days before that, I think it was like around the 8th. Yes, because this happened on the 10th. There had been a new moon in Aries. And I don't know if this is a theme. It could be a theme that these seeding points happen around a new moon. I don't know. but I don't know, but could be. I think there could be some astrological connection to that. I just didn't really focus on researching that, but definitely there was a new moon in Aries around this time, and Mars and Saturn were coming together in our first house in Pisces. We had the North Node, which I'm going to put up right now. The North Node of Fate and Destiny was in our second house at this point in time in Aries. And the South Node was in our, let's see if I can not knock the camera down, was in our eighth house in Libra, right? So we had Venus was in Aries where she isn't that comfortable, and Mercury was retrograde in Aries. So this was like the first seeding point, or this was the seeding point 2 years ago in 2024 when we had this same conjunction that will be occurring what did I say? April 19th. Okay. Losing my words here. So this was the seeding point. I wanted to put it up on the chart because I thought it would be great for us to look at it and see what was going on. I'm not going to put up Venus or maybe I could put up Venus, right? Did I put anything up here for Venus? Venus was in Aries. Let's turn Venus the right way. Venus was in Aries. I don't have another one for Mercury. Let's see here. But Mercury was retrograde, so we won't worry about Mercury. And Jupiter was in Taurus. Oh, I don't have one up for Taurus. Anyways, Jupiter was in Taurus at this time. So, just so you can kind of get an idea for what was going on. I love to do this because it helps you to see where energy was being focused. And then imagine just connecting this with your own natal sun degree or Mars degree or what have you, or Venus, and you can kind of see what was being activated. So I'm going to read for you what was happening for me. Okay. So before I do that though, I want to read some themes of the first house. So the first house is major life themes. Okay. So this was a major time for us in our lives, as eventually the nodes of fate and destiny would also shift into our first house that coming year. So I love this because I think the universe doesn't make any mistakes, and it's preparing us to really see what's to come. That, there's going to be maybe some major shifts coming that is connected with our destiny that we need to be aware of, and that maybe we needed this Mars and Saturn conjunction seeding point, this new seeding point to help us. I think Mars and Saturn coming together in our first house packed a pretty powerful punch. I think obviously the sun was still in Aries, but I think the moon, like I mentioned, was a newer moon. But, I think that it really was for Pisces ascendant opening up this door of the self. We had already been having Saturn there. I think Saturn had moved into our first house in 2023, I believe, in March. So we had already had Saturn there. So this really was a time of, okay, it's time, it's go time. Mars is going to join you there. Yeah, Mars is in Pisces. However, it's still in our first house, which is a Mars house, and it is really that theme of major life themes, the way we navigate our own reality, our spirit. It's the house of self, our personal appearance, right? Knowing ourselves, how we are seen, health, our vitality, our way of life. It's a Dharma house, which I talked about in an earlier video yesterday. If you want to know a little bit more about that, then you can go and watch that. just how we express, our style, our appearance, our personality, our life force. It's just our character. So much is tied to our first house. And this past Mars and Saturn conjunction we are finishing up, that's where we started. So maybe you can start thinking back for yourself, like, what for me and my reality was really crystallizing. I know for myself, and I wrote it down, some themes. Leadership and focus on my role as a single mom was a major theme in my world at that point in time. Like, it's almost like I had been summoned by the gods themselves, right? And was like, this is it, boo. Like, this is it. Like, are you ready? Are you ready? Like, this is it. I had been married for most of, my adult life. And I was going into, later 40s. I'll turn 50 this year. So I just, it was really a time of like, this is the next half of my life starting, responsibilities, fully stepping into my new role, raising, I think the reality and the identity I picked up was the knowing that I probably will be raising my children alone. I will be a single mother raising my children alone. And I don't think that had really set in, but I somehow, when this Mars and Saturn came together in my first house, Saturn had already been there, right? Just kind of working with me and helping me set boundaries and figure out work and bills and being a leader and what that looks like. Um, and then, obviously we have the nodes, in Aries. The North Node is in Aries, which is in the self, which is understanding the self, you know, and saying goodbye to that South Node of partnership and, in Libra, all of those things. It was a very, very a reality, hit for me. Jupiter was in Taurus. So it was like building practical, tangible resources for me and my family. Like, it just, it really, it hit me, I also thought it was interesting how I hadn't thought about partnership as much as I had, but I had launched into this idea of enjoying singlehood and what that could potentially look like. And let me tell you, when you've been married, or you come up in a generation, I'm a Gen Xer, so you come up in a generation where partnership is such a heavy focus. I mean, we have, if you are part of my generation, most of us had Pluto in Libra. So, a lot of our, I feel like, resonance even in life was to be in partnership, to be in a relationship with someone, with, married and kids and a family. And, you know, somehow, this Mars and Saturn really challenged that for me, going into my first house, into that Aries, that self house. So I'm going to let that stay there. And then we came up to that first quarter square, Pisces risings. Okay. That first quarter square, because again, it's a process, and if, I'm going to try to hop back on here and sort of make content on how this new Mars and Saturn conjunction is sort of going, but I love just being able to look back. I think I spoke on an earlier video where looking back for me really helps me to understand my evolution and who I am and who I'm becoming, and not feel like an alien, which most of the time I can feel like. But I think, I will come back and sort of look at this new one as well, but the first quarter square hit over this time period, this 2-year time period. And that came August 16th, 2024. Okay. Mars at this time, right, had changed into, let's see if I can take this down without messing anything up, into Gemini, which is our fourth house. Okay. The nodes were still in Aries and Libra. And Mercury was, of course, retrograde once again in Leo. And Saturn was still in Pisces at this time. And so we had this what we call, when you look at a cycle in astrology, we had like this first quarter square cycle that happened. And a square is of the nature of Mars, which I talked about in an earlier video I made about this new moon. And it is the design of a square is to get us going, right? Is to bring that friction, is to show us where that tension is, coupled with it being the first quarter square of this. It just, that's the time in this cycle where I think, you really feel the heaviness or the weightiness of you, you know, you meaning the self, you meaning the sun, of making things happen, of going and moving and doing what have you, right? Venus was in Virgo. Jupiter now, I don't know if I have another one up there, but I don't. Jupiter had also moved into Gemini. So we'll sort of put that here. Is that upside down? Yeah. So we'll put that here. Like Jupiter had moved into Gemini. Venus was in Virgo, our seventh house. So, wow, right? What a time. What a time. What did I write? So first of all, I'm going to touch on some themes of our fourth house. What are themes around the fourth house? Okay. One, this is, in astrology, this house can represent our paternal bloodline, home, energy changes, home and family, our city, our foundation, our roots, our mothers, past, our lineage, our private world, our conditioning, all of these things, our foundation of happiness can be found here. So, and we had Mars with Jupiter, which, by the way, Jupiter in Gemini is not in a happy spot. It is considered, it's at home in Sagittarius. So if you can imagine Jupiter in Gemini, it's on the opposite side of Sagittarius. So it is away from home and it's far away from home. So Jupiter in Gemini is not as comfortable. And, not to mention whatever Jupiter touches, it sort of expands it. So it's here with Mars, and Mars is, a planet of work and going and action. And it's, being squared by Saturn in our first house of self, which is the planet of work and, just rules and restriction. And, it's here, we have these two malefics squaring each other, basically, for us. And so this was a rough time for us. This date, again, the date, if you can think of and you want to look back on your own chart, was around August 16, or just look at August 2024, around that time frame. What was going on for you? And I'm going to read sort of what was going on, and themes that I felt for my own life as I looked back. I was exhausted. Okay. Needless to say, right? I even looked back at my old work schedule, and the month of August, excuse me, I had maybe like 7 days off in the entire month of August. And I think, August is a 31-day month. So just to give you a little bit of an idea of, what came from this seeding point to now we're in this first quarter square, and my life was very exhausting, being a single mother, trying to take care of my kids, trying to pay the bills, make ends meet, show up for home life, show up for all the school activities my kids are in. Like, I was totally exhausted. Work, family, learning something new. I also had started a new course that I was taking to try to, because again, I'm also thinking long term, right? And what I care about, we are Pisces risings. So a huge part of our life is creation and wanting to create and nurture something that is, of the energy of Jupiter, of the energy of something good and, abundant and feels good and gives back to others. We have Cancer in our fifth house. So, you know, having our ruler even in Jupiter at that time was in Gemini square us, it was a tough time. So I also noticed, I gained weight, sometimes this can be like a one of the results of having a hard Jupiter moment or Jupiter square sort of in your fourth house, if you can imagine, of comfort is, overindulgence. When Jupiter is in a harsh aspect with one of the planets, you notice like sort of the fruit or the karma from that can bring about a negative result, even if it is Jupiter. So Jupiter was not working for us, guys. Our ascendant ruler was not working for us. And sometimes that happens. And so that's why I encourage you to go back. I gained weight. Yeah, there was a lot of stress, cortisol levels rising, right? From all the stress, from all the going, from all the working. Now it brings me to the next cycle in this time frame, which was the opposition. Okay, this was what is considered the full moon point of this transit. And usually, if you've watched some of my earlier videos, the full moon point is like the fruit of what has been sown. It is sort of the culmination. If you think of a full moon, you go outside and you look up at the night sky and you can see it. It's very obvious from all the hard work, from whatever it is that whatever was planted from the seeding point, you're able to kind of see what has bloomed, what has grown up over this time period for you, sort of what has been the karma. And so that happened for us Pisces ascendants around August 8th, 2025. Mars was in Libra, so we will go ahead and move Mars. And for the first time, the nodes were not there. Sorry if my armpit is all over the screen, but it is. Mars was in Libra in our 8th house, and let's take Venus down. We had Saturn, probably for the first time in a long time, had moved into Aries. Okay, so we see that. I'm going to take the sun down. All right, so Saturn had moved into Aries, and then the nodes of fate and destiny. Now, nope. We had the South Node. Sorry, I have a lot of stuff in my hands right now. The South Node was in our 7th house, and the North Node was in our 1st house. Okay. So here we are. So this is setting the stage for this full moon period for us, right? Where, from this Mars and Saturn conjunction period. So we are now, what is that, like August 8th, 2025. It started in April of 2024. So we're more than a year out. You know, it's a 2-year cycle, a longer cycle for Mars and Saturn. And so here we are, and we are in this opposition point, this full moon point. Saturn's in our second house, Mars is in our eighth house. And the nodes are now in our first and seventh. And so I didn't, I'm not going to put this up here, but Venus was in Cancer and Mercury was, of course, retrograde. Can you say it with me? In Leo. And Jupiter, at this point in time, our ruler, had now moved into Cancer. And if I have that, yeah, I can actually put that up. I want to put that up. I want to put that Jupiter, because that's a good, that's good for us Pisces ascendant, because our ruler is now trining us. Our ruler is now in a harmonious aspect to our first house here, right? So, which is what we want to look at, or what we want. We want to feel, not to mention Jupiter is exalted in Cancer and just offers all the action-packed love and, abundance and, just the things that, I think if you are a Jupiterian type person, we look at the glass. We want to look at the glass half full. We want to see how our lives are, working for us, and that there is a greater purpose, and we get to connect with our beliefs. We get to connect with our values and the things that bring us enjoyment. And it's water energy, so it's nurturing, it's cleansing, it's foundational, right? So our ruler had moved, and I will say, let's see, fifth house, right? I'll read some of the themes from the fifth house, which we pretty much know. The fifth house is a good house. Creation, right? Kids, fun, the house of pleasure, dating, desire, attraction, projects, fun projects, romance, recreation, sports, vacations, self-expression. It's a good fortune house as well. So it goes so great with our ascendant. And so, I think that, needless to say, we were going to see some good fruit from this time, from this over a year of Mars and Saturn coming together in our first house. I certainly wrote down some themes, as you can imagine, or do imagine by now, that was happening in my life. So some themes that were pertinent, I guess: dating, relationship building with new people, learning how to align, with good relationships, like, what, just bringing your values and beliefs to the forefront when considering people that you're building and having relationships with. Losing weight. Oh my God, I got more fit. I actually lost weight from that square time, where it was just awesome. Like I didn't know at the time, like I wasn't taking this conjunction and this new seeding point into consideration, but it was so amazing. It was epic. I was just like, oh my gosh, I've been trying to lose weight for over a year, or just keep it under control. And I lost weight and I got healthier. I figured out a way to bring more sleep into my life. So, that was doing great. More relaxing time with my kids, which I love. I absolutely, if you have Cancer in the fifth house, kids are, and you're a Pisces rising, yeah, you already know. So I literally just felt at peace. I felt so happy. I was still working a lot. We had Saturn in our second house of finances and livelihood. Um, I was building a new romantic interest, and that felt good. I mean, I hadn't really done that in years. So I was just like, oh wow, like, how do I kind of felt I almost felt like a kid again, and the fifth house gives you that feeling. It gives you that sort of like fun, the stress is off, yes, I'm adult, but it feels really good to be an adult right now. Okay. So this was that full moon seeding period. And then all good things must come to an end, right? So let's see, we had December 8th, and this is kind of like the wrapping up before this new Mars and Saturn conjunction will take place. So this is the final cycle of this period. And so the third quarter, I call it, well, it is the third quarter square, it's kind of letting go. I consider it, or, I mean, it's considered to be like the letting go, the releasing period of what this transit has meant in your life, what worked, what didn't work, right? What took root and grew and bore fruit that you're still able to utilize and pick from today. So let's go ahead and put up, where was Mars? So this was December 8th, 2025. Mars was in Sagittarius. So that is for us, Pisces risings, our 10th house. Let's put Mars right there. And Saturn wasn't in Aries anymore. It had retrograded back into Pisces, but it wasn't in retrograde at that time. It retrograded back into Pisces, but it had recently gone forward into Pisces. So it wasn't retrograde. It just had gone back into our first house, and dun, 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 it was like wrapping up its cycle. Actually, Saturn was saying, okay, Saturn's been in our first house for what, 3 years, and yeah, it was just like it was its final goodbye to us, and boy was I happy to see it go. But so Saturn was in our first house, Mars was in our 10th house of public career. So I'll read some of the themes of the 10th house here: leadership, career goals, action, house of enterprise, advancement, legal commitments, public status, and things of that nature, formal contracts, what else? Fortune, fame for some people, worldly status, career, bosses, honors, goals, long term. I mean, there's a lot tied to our 10th house. And so that's where Mars was for us. So you can only imagine what we probably were focused on in December of 2025, okay? Jupiter was still in Cancer. Venus was in Sagittarius. And Mercury wasn't retrograde this time, was in Scorpio. And of course, the nodes of fate and destiny were still on our first and seventh house axes, where they will be wrapping up here soon as well. So I will just read some of the themes that I took from this third quarter square and just sort of wrap up here. There was a lot, I think, coming away from this previous Mars and Saturn conjunction seeding period that I was able to gain, I was able to understand, I was able to sort of let go of. I think Mars definitely was having its way, I think, in our life in a lot of ways. Mars is our action. It can bring about sometimes just rough things happening, just harsh realities maybe, or cutting away of things, or, I can't use this anymore, or this isn't going to work anymore, or, um, just a sense of, in the 10th house, I need to get to the top, right? I need to get to the top of what it means to be me. And, with the node being in our first house still, it's still focusing on us taking that leadership role in our life. Saturn has given us all that Saturn can do. Saturn has helped us set boundaries by this point, Pisces rising. Saturn has been that, that sort of, I've heard once before, that father in our life that has just been unmovable, unshakable. And it wanted to remind us in December that, in order for us to get ahead, in order for us to move forth with who we are, what and how we want to give to the world and express and share with the world, we have to be unmovable. We have to be foundational. We have to be sort of structured, right? And where we are and where we're going. And for me in my life, as I sat back and I had this introspection moment, because third quarter time really is about that introspection of, what did this time period bring for me? What did it bring up? Of all the things that's happened, what did I hold on to? What's still here? What grew from this time? What seeded and bloomed and is allowing fruit in my life now? And so, and really, narrowing in on that, because, obviously things are changing, things are moving now. Mars and Saturn are going to be in our second, or are now in our second house of our livelihood and our money and our finances. And, so like I said before, the universe doesn't make any mistakes, guys. It doesn't make any mistakes. There is a flow to life. There really is a flow to life. And if you aren't sure of your flow in life, leave me a comment. I would love to look at your natal chart, or talk to you about your natal chart, or talk you through your natal chart and what's going on in your own life, if you want to get in that flow. Because I think we do better, I think, as humans, when we can be in the flow of our life and not out of the flow of our life. We can. I mean, everybody's all over. I was one of those where, sometimes you're not in the flow of life, and we see what can come from that. And then, the universe will, quickly bring us back in line, right? And we're like, okay, it feels better to be in the flow. Thank you very much. But some of the themes I wrote down from this time was career, working. I felt a lot of that in December, on until tax season, right? Public life, taking a more of a working precedence versus my family. So, that's another thing that can happen. Like, you'll feel like, wow, I had this wonderful Jupiter time where, I had this fourth house activation, and now it's more of like this 10th house activation, a little feelings of overwhelmed by all the work and responsibilities. Again, this is a square. Mars is squaring Saturn. Mars in Sagittarius is squaring Saturn in Pisces. Health matters started to resurface, as we become, or I became, less physical active, and we're moving into the winter months. So it just naturally, I'm just like, oh boy, I'm not moving as much as I was 4 months ago, or what have you. Themes of letting go of the playfulness of the fifth house, I think, probably was the hardest part for me. My life regarding relationships and self-expression and dating, and, you know, I started to take a realistic, and this can happen in the third quarter, I think, and letting go all the way up until now, is you start to take a realistic look at, is this really committal? I know I hate to put it out there like that, but the 10th house is about commitment. It's about, those formal contracts in life, right? These people that, yeah, we have such great chemistry. We work so well together. We spend a lot of fun time together. But is it committal? And the 10th house being the third quarter square as well will sort of expose that time for us. And, we can either choose to be unhappy about it, or we can choose to let it go. We can choose to say, okay, I forgive this. I'm grateful for that time and those memories and those experiences and all the fun I had. But I have to, look at reality. I have to take a sober judgment. The 10th house wants us to take a sober judgment. The first house is here to direct us, to make sure we are being authentic to self. So, yeah, I want to close it out with where we are now. So we have, which we talked about with the new moon happening yesterday, we have this new seeding point, guys, for Mars and Saturn happening. Jupiter's still in our fifth, so I'll leave Jupiter there. It's nice to see Jupiter there, right? But we have this new seeding point for Mars and Saturn in our second house. The nodes of fate and destiny are still in our first and seventh, our partnership house and our first house of self, and, making sure, Pisces ascendants, that we are, what we're doing is going to be a reflection of who we are authentically. And Jupiter wants, soon Jupiter is going to square Saturn and Mars in our second house. I think that's coming up here in the next, well, for Saturn is, I think, going to take a little bit longer, but for Mars, it's going to come pretty quickly. And, I'll probably hop back on and make a video about that, and talk a little bit about that square. But, soon we are going to, the tests are going to come, is what I want to say. And, the test of what this time meant for us and how we move into this new cycle, this new seeding point of Saturn and Mars in our second house, is going to be important. The second house has themes of making money, woohoo, okay, saving money, and our attitude towards money, just in general. It's the house of values, of personal values, livelihood, our worth, what we purchase, the food that we have, expectations, our personal resources, income, our self-esteem. The second house is definitely, which is what I feel like, the nodes being in our first, and then Saturn being in our, just all of this time that we have spent, Pisces ascendants, it has really been about trying to bring us more to a place of us, a place where we are not afraid to take action, a place where we are in the driver's seat, And if anybody, I feel, in the whole zodiac right now, who really has felt everybody else being in the driver's seat, life just being in the driver's seat, everybody there but us, right? It would be Pisces risings, because we have had so many lessons and so much learning and Saturn and the nodes of just, we thought we were somewhere, and then, fate kicked us somewhere else, and we're like, whoa, what just happened here? So, in wrapping up, what I want to say is just know that with this new seating point, you can be in the driver's seat. You can take charge of your life. In fact, you're ready. You're ready to open this new cycle as somebody in the driver's seat, as somebody that's, sort of what I was reading from the beginning with the book, of what it means with Mars and Saturn coming together. Yes, they're malefics and they aren't easy planets to work with. The energy, depending on your chart, it can feel heavy at times, or hard, or cutting, or, you know, all the things that a malefic can bring. But don't forget about Jupiter in our fifth house. And, Jupiter is there to remind us, our ascendant ruler, that, what we have to offer, who we are, our own self expression is enough to put us where we need to be. Okay. And to, take the driver's seat in our life. So I know this has been a really long video, but I want to say this has probably been one of my favorites looking back. And if you like these, I'm going to try to definitely put timestamps below. But if you like the longer style videos where I delve into the full cycle of planets like this, leave me a comment about that, because I have so much to share on that. In fact, I love watching cycles in my life. And I think I mentioned a few videos ago where I actually am really good at taking notes and sort of journaling my life, if you will. One day I might write a book. I'm not owning up to that fully yet. Mercury is definitely a planet that I'm most interested on, I think, in these coming years, and learning. And yeah, so I don't know, but I absolutely love talking about the longer periods, and looking over spans of time to kind of see where we're headed. And like I said, I am going to come back on. I know we're just at a new seating point with Mars and Saturn, but I do want to come back on and talk about what's to come, maybe sort of what to look out for with that first quarter square. So if you stayed with me this long, thank you for listening. And like I said, please leave a comment below, and have a good new cycle, a good new start. And yeah, I will see you next time. Peace and blessings.